All right, let's dive right in. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ben Conway. I'm the co-founder and COO of VNTANA. And today we're going to be talking about maximizing your 3D investment through selling on B2B, e-commerce, metaverse, NFTs, and beyond. So for a little background on VNTANA, for those of you who don't know, we describe ourselves as a 3D infrastructure platform. And so what that means is that we can add 3D capabilities throughout the entire life cycle of your product, from initial design and back and forth between 2D and 3D designers, to development, to internal reviews, assortment planning, all the way through to go to market, which is where we're going to focus today. And the way that we're able to enable this technology across the entire product lifecycle is through our patented optimization algorithms, which can reduce 3D file sizes by up to 99% while still maintaining super high visual fidelity. So this allows users to load really light, really quick models on desktop, mobile, AR, digital showrooms, all sorts of different places. So that'll be kind of the last plug on us for this. Happy to answer any questions about us or anything I talk about later on. But let's dive into some housekeeping. So we will be sending a recording and slides of today's webinar. Afterwards, feel free to share that internally or with a friend if you think it'll be useful. Any questions you have, we'll be addressing those at the end, unless Richard bumps me and says this is super important. And Richard's our head of marketing who's on the call right now and says we need to answer right now. We'll answer all those at the end. And if you need any assistance with Zoom, just use the chat function and Richard would be more than happy to help. All right. So the agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about some basic considerations for 3D selling. So I want to talk about how can you ensure that you're going to be successful when you're selling using 3D, and what do you need to do to make sure that you're actually able to scale it? Because I think that's a super overlooked part of selling in 3D. Then we're going to go over B2B sales and how you can use this in a B2B context. And that's probably where we're actually going to spend the most amount of time today, because that's where we're seeing our customers get the most value out of 3D today. Next, we'll dive into e-commerce. And then finally, we'll get into NFTs and metaverse experiences. So some basic considerations for 3D selling. Diagram your end-to-end workflow early on. I cannot stress how important this is and how often it's overlooked. A lot of times the way that we're seeing 3D come down is through an e-com team or a marketing team's like, we want to try this thing in 3D. And we highly recommend testing and trying things out. We're totally okay with that. But the issue is people put the cart before the horse and they miss out on all of these gaps that might exist. So they start setting up processes that are only going to be effective for a single channel. And that can be really, really problematic. So I think it's very helpful to go from even starting at the raw material stage. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Like, okay, we've got our raw materials. We're going to scan those raw materials. Then we've got back and forth between our designers. Like I'm talking about the entire thing that happens all the way before you actually get into go to market, which is the last phase of the product lifecycle. So diagramming that will help identify any gaps, any current processes that might be lacking. Oh wait, this doesn't scale. Oh wait, this person needs a different sort of file format. Do we have all the data from PLM associated with this 3D asset to put somewhere else? There are lots of questions that come up when you're diagramming this. This also helps you see like, all right, we're going to be using VibeIQ, and then we're going to be using Jor for wholesale, and then we're going to use it on e-com, and then also someone from Meta reached out to us, and we want to test this on Instagram, or we want to test it on Snapchat. What you're going to realize is that when you dig into that a little bit more, there's different specifications that are required for each step of the process. And so more than just like, oh, this might change everything, it might make you quickly realize we might have to bite this off in smaller chunks. And let's try it here, and then we can try it there. So I highly recommend diagramming your end-to-end workflow before you even start looking into selling 3D. That's something we can help you with. That's something other partners like Calypso can help you with, but I think it's immensely important as you're looking to scale up. The next thing that is really important is, what does success look like? We have been a part of multiple tests in the past where there were different ideas of what success looked like. Oftentimes you got your digital product creation team that's involved in the process, and they might have a certain idea of like, I think this would be successful. This is so cool. We created this in 3D. It's live on e-commerce. Isn't this amazing? And then you've got your e-commerce team that's like, Well, we're really focused on increasing conversions, or we really want to drive higher engagement if it's maybe a luxury product because you don't get that many conversions on e-commerce. Like whatever that is, you need to make sure that both of the teams are aligned, and then you need to make sure you have all of the proper tracking mechanisms in place. Is that data linked up? Are we able to track through our site the conversion rates? Is the partner we're working with able to give us the data that we want out of this? How are we going to gauge success for this? And then do we even have the tools to do that? And I know some of this stuff seems really basic, but I've been a part of enough pilots at this point where that hasn't actually happened, that I think it's very worthwhile to point out. So those are all things that you should be thinking about before you actually even dive into selling in 3D. The next thing that you should be thinking about is, okay, we've diagrammed where we want to sell it. We know these channels. We know what we want to track. Now we need to think a little bit more about like, what are the raw inputs we need to get there? So one of the limitations that might come up is a lot of the avenues when you're talking about 3D selling, I'm talking about real-time 3D. I'm talking about an interactive 3D model. I'm not talking about renders like this render that I've got on the side of the screen. I'm talking about real-time interactive 3D. And there's some limitations around that. If you are someone who sells fur, who's got fur on products, that's not going to work in real-time applications right now. If you've got lots of velvet, lots of Sherpa, that's going to be a problem. Displacement maps, let's save. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it is something you need to take a little bit more consideration in when you're using it. I know a lot of knits use displacement maps in their 3D models, but all of these things that are things that you should think about, because what'll happen is, and we've seen this again happen, is like, okay, we're ready to do 3D and they've got scans of boots, for instance, and the boots have fur, and the reality, they just don't look good. They don't look the way that they should. But the problem is they already got the e-com team to sign off on this test, and they hadn't really thought about the fact that, oh, this is actually going in a real-time environment. And so now it's not going to look the way that it should or won't work at all. So that's really important to think about. What product are we going to try and test out? There are new, they call them extensions for GLTF. There are new capabilities, let's say, for real-time rendering for these different types of materials that are coming out all the time, but it's something you should think about before you get started. Another thing you need to think about is the different platforms are going to have different specs. It is not a one-size-fits-all by any means. Snapchat's cool with 2K textures. Meta wants 1K textures. Some people are fine with your export from Browseware, where you've got a single material per UV, or a single UV per pattern piece, basically. Others are like, no, this all needs to be in a 0 to 1 UV space. And so those are all things that you need to think about before you go into selling in 3D. And again, they're all things that are very doable, but they need to be thought about, because what'll happen is you might prep a bunch of files with the idea that you're going to be able to use them in all these different places. But if you don't gather those specifications ahead of time, it's going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of headache for you. POCs and implementations fail when not properly planned or tested. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about, do we have the analytics in place? Do both teams know what they want to test? And then did we pick the right product to test? Something else to note is just generally, a 3D viewer doesn't cut it. Just because you have a 3D model and you have a 3D viewer, to think that you're doing a proper test is really not accurate. That'd be akin to saying, we're going to upload a video and we're going to use the raw video that we had. The video is 500 megabytes large. We'll just let people load it on our e-com site. You would never do that. You're going to optimize all of your images. You're going to optimize all of your video files before they ever go live in a consumer-facing or buyer-facing role. The same is going to be true of 3D. Reducing file size, making sure that the textures are performant, which isn't just around file size. You want to make sure that the model's actually performant. So we'll work on a lot of devices. So not just the latest iPhone, not just the latest Google Pixel. That's always going to be an important consideration. And this is something I added right before this webinar, this last point, because I was just on a call with a client talking about it. And I think it's really, really important. And I think that people don't think about it enough, is how important your material libraries are to get right early on in the process. If you do not standardize your material libraries, if you do not think that about all of the places that this file might ultimately live, if you are only focused on renders, you are going to be kicking yourself later on. And the reason is, you're going to have to go back and rework the materials, or you're going to have to rework them within the program, or you're going to export them and then rework that 3D model to adjust the materials to get it ready. If you standardize ahead of time, and when I say standardize, what I mean is, as much as is possible without materials like fur, you want to make sure that your materials follow PBR spec for GLTF. You can write this down. I'll maybe include it in the email that we send out, Richard, as a note for the recap. PBR spec using the metallic roughness workflow. Those materials will be ready to go for pretty much anywhere that you want to use them, and they'll still look great for renders. It's not like going to take anything away from your rendering capabilities. Oftentimes, if you can get your materials in PBR spec with metallic roughness workflows, you will be set up for success when it comes to selling 3D down the road. Adobe Substance Sampler, we don't have any relationship with them. I'm just letting you know it's an amazing tool. Take a look at it. We're recommending it to clients. It can really enhance your materials and will help you with that standardization process, including scans, including existing scans that you have. All right. This is now live on our website. We might make a few adjustments to this based on some feedback, but the reason that I'm sharing this, and it was included in the deck, is like, I want you to be thinking about all the places that 3D might be used and what is it really, we're talking about selling, we're talking about maximizing your investment. So that's really just the right side of this, but there's a lot of considerations along the way, and there's a lot of ways you can kind of optimize that process so you can get to the selling part a lot faster. All right, B2B selling, let's dive into it. So benefits of selling of 3D and B2B, a lot of you probably already know this. If you're already designing in 3D, which I think many of the people on here are, faster time to market. It's a lot easier to iterate on 3D files than it is on 2D or not even 2D, really samples, actual physical samples. So having a digital twin allows you to get to market a lot faster. This is the big one. 3D is unaffected by supply chain disruptions. We heard this from all sorts of brands over the last 2 years. Those that were prepared didn't have as tough of a time. I mean, everyone's had a tough time, but didn't have as tough of a time when COVID hit and supply chains got totally rocked. And now we've got all sorts of crazy things happening in the world. So having a strong 3D process helps protect you or insulate you from those supply chain disruptions. You've got a reduction in prototypes, which is obviously great for sustainability. It's great for reducing costs. It allows buyers to examine product details closer up. So then this is opposed to 2D imagery. You're able to actually zoom in on the details, see the texture, see the material, understand how the whole garment comes together. That's really good for that. And then you're getting higher levels of product engagement when you are leveraging 3D. People are going to spend some more time with it. So some B2B selling considerations. It's okay to use 2D imagery alongside 3D. In fact, we oftentimes recommend it. Sometimes you don't have it. Sometimes it's great to just use a 3D model and you can replace that, but it's okay. I make this specific call out because sometimes people silo them in their minds, like put them together. Absolutely. E-commerce, put them together. B2B, put them together. It's totally fine to have 2D imagery alongside 3D. It's not one or the other. Ultimately, we might get there as rendering capabilities continue to improve and improve. You might just have the 3D model, but today, use both. Something else to note on B2B selling is like context is really important. We're not sitting here saying you need to use 3D for absolutely everything. You should 100% of the time be using 3D. You got to consider the context. Sometimes when you're meeting with a buyer, they've got super limited time and you have a huge number of styles and colorways to show this person. And so the feasibility, you might have, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 images for a product. They might look at 2. So to take the time and like actually engage with 3D, it may not happen. And we've seen instances where that isn't the case. That's okay. You can use 3D as a follow-up. You can send them emails with links to some of their favorite models. You can use it in some of the like showrooms and other tools that I'm going to show you in a little bit. But just consider the context, because we've seen people like shy away because they're like, oh, it didn't work. Like the buyers didn't have enough time to engage with it. It's like, well, maybe that wasn't the right use case for deploying the technology. So something else to consider. And then the other consideration, and this is really when I'm going to show you some of the different platforms where you can leverage 3D today in B2B selling. You want to verify what automated means. Automation is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Optimization is a term that gets thrown around a lot. It behooves you to dig into what does that mean? Ask some more questions. Are you going to be manually adjusting these files? Does automated just mean that you're going to take care of everything? So I'm going to send you all my Clo files or all my Browseware files or Keyshot files. You're going to export it, do whatever else that needs to be done and handle it for me. And maybe that's fine, but there's a hidden cost there. And there's also an enormous amount of time that gets eaten up, which is very valuable in this industry or any industry. But I know that many of you are under the gun in fashion and trying to get these products out. And so when you have to wait weeks to manipulate files that you already spent weeks building, that really becomes a problem. So verify with all the vendors that you're talking about, what does automated mean? What's the maximum file size that you expect? What are the specifications of the file that you expect me to provide you? What are the limitations of your platform? How are you rendering? Like, you don't need to get into all of it, and there's people that can help you, but it's certainly worth asking the questions. Do not just take people at their face value for, we support 3D. Some of the places to sell in 3D. And so these are the ones that I see come up most commonly. We work with all of them, but Detail, if you're not familiar with Detail and Pixel Pool, they provide some great solutions for digital showrooms. And what I mean by digital showrooms is like an actual retail store, like a retail environment. They also do some assortment planning and some very cool tools around that. And they support 3D. New Order has added a 3D viewer. They support 3D files. The call out being the files all need to be under 40 megabytes, which is pretty much a problem for anyone using ClowShot, your KeyShot, Clo, Moto, Browseware. All those files are going to come out at usually 100 megs plus, if not 500, 700 megabytes. But they do support 3D, and there are multiple ways to do it using iframe, things like that. I can get into that a little bit more. But New Order is a wholesale platform. So for those of you who don't know, New Order is one of the biggest wholesale platforms out there. It's the platform that Nordstrom requires that all of their vendors use. VibeIQ. VibeIQ is on the visual line planning side, but they also work on the retail. They've got an amazing Unreal showroom that allows you to really design your retail store super quickly, and it looks really realistic. I'm going to show you a bit about that. That's super cool. Hatch. Hatch is an actual like digital showroom. So this is like actually physically on premise. They also have some digital versions. We're a startup within PVH that is now spun out and serving other brands like Havaianas. Very cool stuff. Definitely worth checking them out. Jor, competitor to New Order. We have a direct integration there. Jor is an amazing wholesale platform, allows buyers to browse through your entire catalog, look at images, see all the detail. It's got all sorts of connections, making sure you've got all the data you want in there, and they natively support 3D with an integration with us. And then finally, Beyond XR, which has some awesome showroom capabilities and offers a variety of ways to sell in 3D in a B2B and even B2C context. Okay, so I'm going to try and I'm going to talk over some of these things as we're going, because I've got a number of videos here because I just think visual is a lot better for this. So this is Jor. This is what the platform looks like if you haven't seen it. Right here, you see you've got an integrated 3D model. It's the first image that comes up. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the e-com section of things. But you can see they've also got 2D images in there. They've also got photos that are there. So again, you don't have to replace. All the models in here are ready to go for augmented reality. It's a pretty fun feature. It's a cool feature. We get a lot of great feedback on that. So with Jor, the way the connection works, if you were to use VNTANA, for instance, basically, and the way that you're going to use connections for most people, you've got your style number that's on VNTANA that's been uploaded through a CSV file, or that's been pulled from your PLM or PIM or wherever else you've got that data stored. You've got it on Jor. API associates them, boom, a 3D model is automatically delivered. So it's a fully automated process. Basically, you just have your data on one side, you've got your data on the other, and the connection pulls the data in. All right. So now we'll take a look at VibeIQ. So this is that virtual retail store that I was talking about. So you can see here, they're moving a rug around, they're moving some of the furniture around, like, and then you look at the quality of the renderings here, and it's pretty amazing. They're using Unreal Engine to power this whole thing. So it's got the latest and greatest. And then you can actually view optimized 3D models directly within VibeIQ. Again, they're a partner that's got an integration, so the process can be fully automated. Same thing as Jor. You've got data on Vibe, you've got data on VNTANA. They automatically connect and talk to each other. The other thing I'd recommend, I know it's not part of the B2B side of things, but we're seeing a lot of clients look at Vibe on their visual line planning, some very cool tools. If you all have looked at Miro or Mural, they have that, but targeted for the fashion industry. So they understand kind of what you're doing. I would definitely recommend taking a look at them. They overcome a lot of the limitations that people complain about with Miro and Mural. Great tools, but sometimes doesn't do everything that designers want it to do. Hatch. So this is a video of 3D on Hatch, our integration with Hatch. Again, it's kind of a similar sort of idea to Jour, but this is really often leveraged for in-person meetings. They've got hardware that goes along with this. It's super cool. If you haven't checked out Hatch, I would take a look at it. If you're looking at building out a digital showroom that's physical, Hatch has some really great tools for doing that and can kind of handle it end to end with you. And they also have Stitch, which is a part of, they've now combined into an organization which can help you in scaling up your 3D process, particularly if you're browseware users. So beyond XR. So get out of that. Oh, share the wrong screen. Here we go. All right. So this is what, you know, a room in Beyond XR might look like. This is web-based, it's super light. If any of you have looked at like Decentraland or anything like that, it's a million times faster than that. You may not have the same level of interactivity, but they do a great job. They've grown enormously fast. And so what's cool about this is that you've got this web-based showroom that you can access. Here I can see like images of the products that are hanging up on the walls. But I can also click on this little 3D icon. And with the 3D icon, I can load a super light model that I'm then able to interact with. So I can zoom in on the model, I can check it out, I can go into full screen mode if I want to do that. Oh, maybe not on this one. You can interact with the model, you can view the model in augmented reality. And that's like an additional layer. And so I think this is one of the better ways of implementing 3D right now. There's some cool things that are being done with like VR headsets. And like Virtual Retail is a company that does a lot of cool stuff in VR. There's someone you might want to take a look at. But what's nice about this is it's super accessible. Not everyone has a VR headset. It's got that nice balance of, it was 3D renderings that generated this image, but it's light, it's 2D, and then you overlay that interactive 3D on top of it. I think it's a really great way to start introducing some of your buyers to the concept of leveraging 3D in making buying decisions. Cool. And then also within Beyond XR, and what's cool about them is they have like the showroom side of things, but they also have web-based that isn't showroom, is that they've got a few different options for the right type of buyer, the exact environment that you're looking for. This here is showing the VNTANA Flow plugin, uploading a file, optimizing it, and then it's going to pull it in directly into Beyond XR. So once you're in Beyond XR, if you've got your files on VNTANA, you've got your data in Beyond XR, here you go, you've got your images, and then you also have your 3D asset that exists there out of the box. So Beyond XR, if you haven't spoken with them, speak with them. Mark and Noam are great guys. They're building really cool tools. And I know that they've been growing their customer base in the fashion industry quickly. They started out in beauty, and now you'll see them in all the PI apparels and stuff like that. Cool. The last thing that I'm going to talk about on the B2B selling side of things is an option that we offer within VNTANA. And this is, we call it showrooms. It's really kind of more of a line sheet tool, but it's a really easy way to share 3D with some of your buyers, maybe after a meeting. So, or in advance of a meeting of like, hey, here's a sneak peek at some of the stuff that we're doing. So the way that that works is you've got your 3D models that are on VNTANA. They've been connected through the Clo plugin or the Browseware plugin or exported from Keyshot, whatever it is. If I click edit here, I can see a bunch of models. I can search for them. I can add them quick to my showroom. And then I click the share button, copies a link. And now I have multiple 3D objects on a page that I can interact with. I can pull up into full screen mode, zoom in, check out some of the details if I want to do that, of the fabrics, viewed them all in augmented reality. If you've got hotspots that are calling out data about the product, maybe you've got a more technical product, you can do that. But it's just a way to view all of them in a single page. And then we'll pull any metadata that you have associated with these. So it's a really quick and easy way to like start sharing some designs in 3D. It could be internally, or it could be from a B2B buyer perspective.